if you could tell us, why is there a need for educating every parent about this? The things that we've just discussed, any parent, any person who is, whether he's salaried, whether he's self-employed, but definitely there's a need to educate them about education inflation. So could you please explain us this whole thing and why it has become so very important now?
Yeah, so Pallavi, first I tell you that we had this survey conducted last year with Kanta, IMRB Kanta, and out of the various life goals which people articulated there, children's education continues to be one of the top goals for which people are today focused on. And also, it said that nearly 50% of the Indian parents, they found it difficult to afford higher education for their children because of lack of financial support. So, and just before it started, Mr. Pai was mentioning that the typical Indian parents would not really want to take loans for educating their children. At least that's how we are, our value system is. So if our life goal remains revolving around children's education, and education is becoming expensive. If you look at the top B schools, the top IIMs today have a fee of anywhere between 25 to 30 lakh rupees, which used to be anywhere in the range of 15 lakh rupees till 5 years back, or maybe lesser than 15 lakh rupees. Yeah. So inflation is playing a very critical role in deciding the affordability, and as parents, we need to be aware of that, and we need to start preparing for that, start factoring the inflation part in savings that we keep aside for our children's education. The safest way for that would be, there are a lot of tools which are available on the internet today. You can go and pick up any of those calculators which factor in inflation, which also factor in what is the kind of return that you're expecting on your portfolio, which also gives you an idea whether you are a conservative, a moderate, or an aggressive investor, and on the basis of that, what is the kind of return that you can expect. And it gives you an idea on how much you should be saving on a monthly or a yearly basis if you have to reach at that financial goal, or you have to reach at that amount which you are planning to have for your children's education at the time when it is needed. So my suggestion there would be that it is very, very important to decide and define that amount. In financial terms, we call it future value of money. So if your goal today is 5 lakh rupees, considering the inflation, how much that 5 lakh rupees is going to look like, let's say 10 or 15 years hence, when the parents need that money for their children's education. How much do you need to start investing today? And what kind of long-term investment tools do you pick up, or long-term investment instruments do you pick up, so that you are systematically investing and meeting your goals adequately?
Since we're talking about the different kinds of skills, and since parents are pressured into this because obviously of the marketing and the kind of environment we're living in, the digital world, so to say, so could you tell us, how can insurance plans help parents in planning for this new educational age, and what should be the right strategy for parents to follow?
Sure. First of all, I must acknowledge that the words of Mr. Pai, they come as such a big relief and learning, especially to come from someone who's been a pioneer in the IT industry, not only in our country, globally, and emphasizing on the human side of growing up. That's very, very important, Mr. Pai. Thank you so much for that advice. Coming to how insurance can help in planning for new education. Pallavi, if I take you back a few years, till a few years back, when in our country we did not have too many investment options, our parents only had two primary sources of savings. One was LIC policy, second was fixed deposits. Or maybe we had some of them who believed in systematic monthly savings. We had recurring deposits. Uh, and my answer to the question that you asked me, it lies in that itself. That the reason why all of us got educated in middle class families and our parents could afford that was because they had this habit of disciplined long-term savings, which they had started with. How insurance helps you is it's a long drawn product. You are paying your insurance premium for 10, 15, 20 years, and the maturity amount comes to you after the policy term has matured. So it's a disciplined way of investing. It doesn't really give you too many options of, and there are options of withdrawing your funds premature, but it's not easy, and hence it builds that disciplined long-term savings habit for you. There are products which offer you guaranteed returns, which means that as parents you don't have to be worried about volatility in the interest rates. If you have invested in a certain plan today, then whatever is the rate which is guaranteed in that plan, you are going to get that rate at the time of maturity, which could be, let's say, 20 years hence as well. Another significant factor why insurance is a preferred mode for funding for education is the tax efficiency. The maturity amount that you get in insurance plans, subject to a couple of parameters being met, it is tax-free. So it becomes very, very efficient for you to save through an insurance policy. I also want to bring in another aspect of insurance here, which is protection, which is the plain simple life insurance. So if as a parent I feel that I need some amount of money 10 years hence to be provided for my children, in case of an eventuality during those 10 years period, so that my children's education doesn't get derailed, life insurance policies also offer you that element of protection. It takes care of your children's future goals. They remain protected. And within our company also, we have products like GIG, which is a guaranteed plan, or we have a product which is called Flexi Income Goal, which starts giving you interim payouts. And these products have all been designed keeping the long-term goals of people in mind. So I think insurance really helps you in making systematic, disciplined, long-term investments, which are tax efficient, as well as offer you protection.
So, Mr. Pai, one last question to you. Since we already talked about the multiple career options that the children have in front of them today, vis-a-vis which were there like maybe 10 or 20 years ago. So any piece of advice as to how the planning part can match up to the education needs of today?
Well, I would agree with Dheeraj. Everybody should save money for the rainy day. Mm-hmm. Because money is not going to grow on trees. It comes because you work hard, you don't consume everything that you earn, and you save. So we have to save. Mm-hmm. And we must be very careful that when we save, we keep the money safe. When we are younger, we have the temptation to put money into instruments which have got greater risk. Yes, we must take some risk when we are younger, but we must decide the quantum of money that we can take a risk on. So we always have money at call. And I am one of those who believe that you must consume less than you earn. Mm-hmm. Because if you consume more than you earn, then you're going to get into trouble because you have children, you have family, the dependents, etc. So you got to inculcate a habit of saving, and you must inculcate a habit of saving in your children too. Mm-hmm. Because remember, what we do in later life is very often what we are told as children and what we understood as children. So children should be taught to save money and to keep some money and not use the pocket money, not to spend the entire pocket money, and spend and accumulate money over a period of time, and spend what is essential for your child. Don't overspend. Don't try to do too many things because the value may not be there. Don't try to copy others. Sit down and think about what you want for a child and give them a very good education with values. Values are very, very important, right? You see the most successful people around the world, many of them are grown up in middle-class families with great values, which they have even now. They're very humble. They're very down to earth. They're very, very understated, correct? And I think it's very important to have, because that is required for success in future. That's my personal view. And of course, when they finish schooling, we want them to go to the best colleges. We want them to get the best professional degree, and that for that too, you're required to save money. So I think you have to play it very, very carefully, because like I said earlier, you're going to have very few children. We don't have many children, and we have to lavish our love and care on the children. And as you get older, Pallavi, when you look back on your life, how will you determine whether you are being successful or happy? If a child is not doing well, but children don't do well after you work very hard 25, 30 years, what you look back and say, what have you done in your life? You could be the biggest, most richest person in the world. You could be the most powerful man in the world. But if your children are not done well, they don't settle down, they don't do well, they don't get a good education, they don't do well, they're not doing, and they're not happy. I mean, your whole life is gone, right? So I think it's very essential that we do things in a very structured manner and make sure that we have enough for our children, and we inculcate the savings habit. We inculcate the right balance between frugality and spending.
We are already learning a lot from Mr. Pai as to what has to be done and what is to be avoided. But when it comes to financial planning, are there any common mistakes which need to be completely avoided for a better result and better planning?
So I think the first common mistake which I have come across from investors or parents is that we don't have a sharp clarity on the goal itself. We don't know what is the future amount which is needed to fulfill my child's education goal. So first thing I would say is define your goal clearly. Second is start investing early. Third thing is, investment as a, overall investment as a philosophy is not a short-term philosophy. So plan long-term. When I say plan long-term, I mean to say stay invested. Don't get tempted by the volatility in the markets. There's a very famous Fidelity study, old Fidelity study, which said that the investors who made the highest returns were not the ones who were very smart in switching and timing the markets. They were the ones who forgot that they had money invested in Fidelity and it continued to grow for decades together. So I'm not saying forget your money, but all I'm saying is stay invested. Stay invested for long. Giving into the temptations of markets is probably a mistake which is to be avoided completely. Some of the things which really derail our long-term plans are a requirement for emergency funds. We at times are compelled to dip into our long-term goals, and that derails the plan. So create an emergency fund and always keep it aside. There are various rules of thumbs that we apply in financial planning, but typically it is said that at least 3 months of your monthly expenditure amount should be kept aside as an emergency fund, so that you don't have to dip into your savings, which you are making for your child's long-term goal. And last thing I would say is, if it is possible, lock in your money in the guaranteed products. Anything which takes care of the worries around interest rate fluctuation. Look at those investments. They will take a lot of your worries away.
In fact, Dheeraj, just to close the session, as you rightly said during the session as well, that financial planning and good habits, this is something part of our daily life. It cannot be done in a day's time. So lastly, how can one make sure that the returns that one is aiming at on the education fund outspaces inflation? You obviously told a couple of things during the session, but just to summarize the whole thing.
First thing is that, power of compounding is known as the 8th wonder in the world. If I continue to invest for the long term, then the compounding of my returns on the investment is something which will adequately take care of inflation effect. Second thing is systematic investment will, in technical terms, it is called rupee cost averaging, which means that if I continue to invest a similar amount of money for a long period, and my investments are being deployed at different rates, that also is very effective in beating the inflation. Third thing is asset allocation. How much money do you want to invest in fixed income instruments? How much do you want to play in equities? There I would first say is, if you don't know how the equity markets or how the fixed incomes behave, rely on a good investment product, rely on fund managers and allow them to take decisions. But again, as a rule of thumb, there's one simple rule of thumb which says that 100 minus your age is the amount of money which should get exposed to equities. So, if somebody is at the age of 40, then 60% of the amount can go in equities. But if you're at 50, then you have to start reducing that. Mm-hmm. Know your appetite. Just because there's some product or some instrument which has given fancy returns, do you have that kind of appetite to play in high risk markets? That's something that only you would be able to tell for yourself. Mm-hmm. So these are some of the things which I feel: focus on compounding, go for rupee cost averaging, focus on asset allocation, and be careful about where you're investing. If you're able to take care of all these things, I'm very confident that parents will be able to take care of inflationary increase in costs.